Let's turn our Bibles tonight to Matthew chapter 18. Matthew 18. I'd like to read it here tonight together, and then we'll get into our study. Matthew 18, beginning in verse 15. Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, or sin against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. Now, let me just stop there for a moment. We often look at this as something you would do just in a church. It's in a church setting. Somebody offended me, now I'll do something about it. We almost we put it into its own little box. But the reality is if somebody that we know does something hurtful to us, we're to go and to let them know what they have done. Okay, so they've sinned against you, they've hurt you. You go and tell them their fault between you and him alone. And if he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee one or two more, that in the mouth of two or three witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen man and a publican. There is a separation that takes place there. Verily I say unto you, whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. Let me stop there just to kind of explain that. What does it mean to bind and to loose? I read a story just today. Erwin Lutzer just shared a story about a couple of men that were bitter, and they were in Saskatchewan, up in Canada, in a small church. And these two, they were brothers. They had been bitter with each other for 13 years. And one evening, the church was gathered together, and the pastor and the deacons got together, and they met with these two men and said, "We are going to be here, and we are going to pray until you are reconciled, till this whole thing is done with." And so they had a basement there in the church, so they went down in the basement, and the deacons and the pastor were around them, and they were praying, and these two men began talking, and the one man said to the other, said something to the effect, I'm sorry for, that you feel bad, or something like that. And the other said, well, you admit that you're the one that's wrong. And the men just said, well, that's not enough, and they just kept praying. And they were just begging God to bring about repentance. And they were there for a good amount of time, and finally, they broke. And they went through a process of reconciliation, shedding tears, and coming back together. So much so that really started a revival in their church. They were having special services, and on that Sunday, those two brothers who had been at odds for 13 years were standing and singing a special before the church, and it sent a strong message to the church, knowing that they had been at odds for 13 years, and now we're back together. What does that mean? God uses believers. Where two or three are gathered together in the Lord's name, the Lord's there. And he uses us to bind, and he uses us to loose. He'll use that group of believers to have an impact, because especially when they're controlled by the Spirit of God. And when they're praying and when they're seeking and working on behalf of the Lord will use that. So whatsoever ye shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever ye shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So there they loosed these men, and they were set free from what they did, not only here, but also in their relationship above. Again, I say unto you, verse 19, that if two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them of my Father which is in heaven. For where two or three are gathered together in my name, there am I in the midst of them. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, How oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Let me stop there. In Jewish tradition, they would forgive up to 3 times. They figured 3 was enough. If you sinned the same sin against somebody and they would come to you, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have said this to you. I forgive you. You do it 3 times. After that, that's it. We're done. Don't come to me anymore. So Peter is actually suggesting here extending even more grace to the other person. And he's probably expecting to receive from the Lord a good pat on the back, but the Lord doesn't give that to him, does he? He doesn't. Till 7 times, verse 22, Jesus saith unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. So you can imagine Peter's calculator running into effect here, and he's thinking, wow, 490 times. Well, who's going to keep track of 490 times? I don't think anybody is. The point here that Jesus is trying to make is when your brother comes to ask you for forgiveness, you extend to him forgiveness. He's not asking if you feel like it or not. He's saying if they ask for forgiveness, you forgive. We want to feel good about forgiving. We like to feel, and we have the power to forgive or not to forgive. And so we want to feel right about extending that forgiveness to that other person, right? By nature, that's the way we are. And we don't want to extend forgiveness until we feel like it. But is that what Jesus says? That's not what he says. Jesus saith unto him, I say not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Verse 23, therefore is the kingdom of heaven likened unto a certain king, which would take account of his servants. Okay, so he gives this parable. And when he had begun to reckon one was brought unto him, which owed him 10,000 talents. But for as much as he had not to pay, his Lord commanded him to be sold, and his wife, and children, and all that he had, and payment to be made. Okay, here's this guy, he owes so much money he can't pay back. And so this is the end of the year when he's reckoning, he's doing his accounting, and he finds out that one of my servants has lost me all this money. So I'm going to sell him, I'm going to sell his wife, and I'm going to sell his children to at least get back some of the money. And also when I do that, if I sell him, I'm rid of him, and I won't lose the money that he's been losing for me. So at least stop the bleeding that way, and I'll get a little bit of this money back. The servant, therefore, because he knew he was going to be sold and his whole family, fell down and worshipped him, saying, Lord, have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Then the Lord of that servant was moved with compassion and loosed him and forgave him the debt. Just forgave him the debt. You know what? You don't have to pay me. That's huge. But the same servant went out and found one of his fellow servants, which owed him 100 pence, and he laid hands on him and took him by the throat, saying, Pay me that thou owest. And his fellow servant fell down at his feet and besought him, saying, Have patience with me, and I will pay thee all. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? And he would not, but went and cast him into prison till he should pay the debt. So when his fellow servants saw what was done, they were very sorry, and came and told unto their Lord all that was done. Then his Lord, after that he had called him, said unto him, O thou wicked servant, I forgave thee all that debt, because thou desiredst me. Shouldest not thou also have had compassion on thy fellow servant, even as I had pity on thee? And his Lord was wroth, and delivered him to the tormentors, the torturers, till he should pay all that was due unto him. So likewise shall my heavenly Father do also unto you, if ye from your hearts forgive not everyone his brother their trespasses. Jesus here speaks of the importance of forgiveness. Why forgiveness connected to bitterness? Well, because they go hand in hand. What is bitterness? I was doing some research here before the service this evening. What is bitterness? Just your answer. What do you think bitterness is? I don't think I have this in my slides, so that's why I'm asking. Yeah, Clark? Okay. Holding a grudge. What were you saying, Clark? Okay, an attitude of resentment. What's resentment? Indignant anger. I looked it up, Clark, so whatever that means. What's indignant anger? Well, I call it festering anger, right? Okay, what else? Any other thoughts? Yes. I think that's a great way to put it. When something bitter, you have that taste stuck in your mouth. When you think about a person, you feel that way about them. You just have this terrible feeling about this person because of something that they have done, or as it says online, anger and disappointment at being treated unfairly, resentment. I saw another one that it's an emotional state of feeling let down and unable to do anything about it, or more colloquially, to always feeling a loser. Embitterment is different than anger because although it involves the same outrage, it also involves feeling helpless to change things. I think that's definitely a part of that. Almost acting though like bitterness, you're solely the victim in this, which isn't always true. Yes? Deep-rooted, yeah. And the Bible even deals with that, doesn't it? It talks about a root of bitterness, and we'll look at that in just a few minutes. But yes, it goes deep, and it's hard to dig that thing up when it's there. Here are some signs that you are bitter. You think you deserve more than what you get. You don't feel satisfied with your present achievements. You think everyone is out to get you. You don't appreciate how good people treat you. You don't acknowledge other people's skills. It's hard for you to congratulate your friends on their success, especially if they're the ones that anger you. Just some thoughts there about bitterness. All right, so as we get started, where does bitterness begin? Where does bitterness begin? Okay, it starts the perceived wrong. Say it out loud. In our heart, right? Bitterness starts in our heart where, there's this perceived wrong, or it could be a true wrong, that stirs us up, and now it's affecting who we are and what we are. And I'm sure that we've all dealt with bitterness to some degree or another. Right? So I said it starts the heart. It's often a pride thing. Toward a person, it could be toward an institution. At Bob Jones, I knew people who they had an issue with Bob Jones, and to this day they do, and they'll write all sorts of nasty things online about the school because maybe they got some demerits, or they were treated a certain way, they feel like they didn't do anything wrong at all, and they were punished for something. And so there is bitterness toward an institution. It could be toward a business. It could be toward a boss, somebody like that. But there is bitterness. There's anger. There's resentment, and it just stays deep down inside. And sometimes it's our little pet, and it comes up, and we almost get to the point where we like it because I deserve to feel angry with that person, with that institution, with that business, with that boss, whomever it is, because they treated me unfairly. That's a heart problem. Bitterness is a heart issue. When a person is born again, he recognizes in his heart that he is wicked, that he is incurably sick. That person recognizes before God that they are a sinner. They're dead in their trespasses and sins. They also recognize in God that he's perfect, he's just, he's holy, and that we are not. And that person then becomes completely desperate, flailing like they're drowning in the sea, and there's no hope for them. They're going to die except for God in mercy and grace reach out and rescue them. And so we cry out to God, and through Jesus Christ, who died on the cross, we are delivered from our sin. Now here's what happens when we're bitter. We choose to go back into a state of death. Okay, we were dead in our trespasses and sins before we were saved. We were rebels, rebelling against God. You see it in our culture today. I see an ad every once in a while, and it goes. I think it's AT&T, and it goes something like this: "Give the people what they want. Give the people what they want." Do you know what people want? Whatever makes them happy. And most of the time, lost people, what they want is something that is in direct opposition to the character and to God himself. They're rebels. When we choose bitterness, what we're doing is we're choosing to go back to a state of rebellion. It's a heart issue. I was lost, now I'm saved. I'm choosing to go back to living like I'm lost, holding a grudge, living in pride. The heart is deceitful above all things. You can't even read that. You guys need to move up. And desperately wicked. Who can know it? Who can know the heart? We can't. Looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. It's interesting as you meditate upon that, what bitterness does, right? Bitterness, it says, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. Does bitterness affect anybody else? Yeah, when you're bitter, what do you like? When a person's bitter, not you, somebody else, okay, we'll put it that way. When somebody's bitter, what are they like? Short with people. A crab apple. Now, some people might not know what a crab apple is. They are really, really tart. My kids eat them when we go to Minnesota. They love the tartness. Yeah, what else? Yes, Beth? Okay, yeah, sometimes they want others to join in with them, so they might go tell somebody else the whole story, and then they say, well, how dare they do that to you? Well, they haven't heard both sides of the story either, have they? Yes. Okay, unthankful people. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, no, that's exactly what happens. I have this weed at my house. I don't know what it is, but I really, really hate it. And so I go out and I planted some plugs in my yard. I think I mentioned that before. And so I'm trying to water those things because we haven't had any rain for a month. And I mean, that's terrible for trying to get plugs to grow. And so I'm out there, I'm trying to water these things, keep them moist. And then I look in between the plugs, and there are these annoying weeds, and they show up every year. And when they grow, they grow wild and crazy. I mean, they're just horrible. So I'm out there, I'm picking each little tiny one as they come up, But you can't keep up. Once the rains start, I mean, they just go like crazy. And that's what bitterness is like. It starts really little. And this little root starts. And I wonder if these weeds don't have roots under the ground that are there and they die. I mean, there's nothing now. There's nothing from about December till the summer. So I think what happens is they have roots under the ground. And I even tried to work the soil this year, hoping to pull that junk up. But that stuff gets in there, and it just keeps coming back. And that's what bitterness is like. When you just let it go, it just spreads. It spreads in your heart, and it spreads to other people. And it affects your attitude. It affects your spirit. It affects the spirit of those around you. That's why bitterness is so dangerous in a church, because it just affects other people as well. And so you have to deal with it. And we're going to talk about that here this evening. Annoyance or hurt turns into resentment, which is connected directly with anger and resentment, which becomes bitterness. So we're annoyed or we're hurt by somebody. If we don't deal with it, we resent them. I resent that person for hurting me or for annoying me, doing something that I didn't like. And so we resent them and we become angry with them, and we won't talk to them. We'll think about them all the time, and we'll think about how they have annoyed us or hurt us, but we won't do anything about it. What should we do? What should happen? What are some results of bitterness? What are some of the results of bitterness? Some things that you think of that come with bitterness. We talked a little bit about this, but some of the attitudes or thought processes of a person who is bitter. I kind of put them into little, I can't say categories, but ideas, if nothing else. Beth. Okay, in a church, it can result in a split, for sure. Yep. It spreads, yep. Yes, Elizabeth? Yeah, it affects you physically, can't it? I mean, you can become ill if you dwell upon that feeling too much. Was there another hand over here? Yes. Payback. Okay, payback. We might say revenge. I'm going to get them back. Yes. That's right. Yeah. You know what? You might get hurt at Community Baptist Church by somebody else. And that just might happen here. And here's the reality. If you're really embedded and you're a diligent servant to the Lord at Community Baptist Church, I will guarantee you that at some point you will get hurt. Because you are pouring in time, you're volunteering your time, and then somebody says something that hurts. Now, what happens to some folks is they get hurt, they begin to resent. And then they see everybody else, and they assume that they feel the same way as that other person who may or may not have intended to hurt your feelings. But what ends up happening is people over time, they just say, you know what, they're not friendly over at that church. Or they'll say, they such and such, you know, and it might be one person that hurt them, or it might even be two. And so they generalize and they say that it's everybody. And then what they'll do is they'll leave that church, their family, because the church is the people. They leave and desert the family. And Jeff Babin mentioned holes. You know, there are holes in church, and the Lord wants to fill those holes, and He has you to fill that hole. But sometimes a person leaves without dealing with resentment and anger and hurt and annoyance, and they go on. And you know what they're going to find if they go to another church? You know what they'll find? The same thing. Do you know why? Because they're fallen people everywhere we go. And like, who was it that just said, you're going to find fallen people, and what ends up happening is there is an obsession. We got to move. I just saw the time. We become obsessed, right? When you're bitter, you obsess. There's revenge. I just heard about somebody that just shot up and killed 8 people out in California and then killed himself. I'd be interested in finding out what the motivation was there. I'm going to guess that there was probably bitterness. And then he probably targeted those 8 people because those people were a part of this. I don't know this for sure, but I'm guessing it wasn't something random. And revenge comes as a result of bitterness. Unwilling to forgive. Hold the offending party hostage. They've hurt me, now I'm going to hold them hostage. He or she doesn't deserve my forgiveness, is what a bitter person thinks. Withdrawal and self-pity. Feel bad for ourselves. I've been hurt, treated unfairly. That person, was wicked and mean and nasty to me. So we withdraw. Illness, Elizabeth mentioned. It affects us physically. If you let it, it'll affect you physically. How do you avoid bitterness? So how do you avoid it? Just real practical. The Lord dealt with it. Verse 15. Yes, Dana? All right, good. That sounds real easy, doesn't it? Yeah. But if you make it a habit, it does become easy. Or what else will happen is what it says in 1 Corinthians 13. That when you love people, love beareth all things. You're not quickly offended. You're not quickly hurt once you choose to love people. But when you are hurt, when you are offended, tell the person who offended you, Matthew 18:15. So you go to them and you tell them, you know what you said to me, and this is the way I would recommend you approach somebody. You say, the other day or just 5 minutes ago or whatever, you said something and I took it this way. You're giving them the benefit of the doubt when you say, I took it this way. Oh, that's not at all what I meant by that. I'm going to guess that's probably what they're going to say. But you're letting them know that you were hurt. Instead of letting that fester, and the next time you see them, you kind of do a half smile at them, but you don't talk to them. And then you avoid them at all costs. That happens. And by the way, that happens in marriage between a husband and a wife. A person says something, it hurts the other person, and what do? It takes them a day or 2 or 3 days to finally go because they get tired of living, secluded from their spouse. And so finally they're like, okay, I'll finally go tell them. And then what ends up happening is there's a war. There could have just been a little battle, right? Hey, you said this, it hurt me. Oh, I'm sorry, I never meant that. But now you waited 3 days and they say, well, why didn't you talk to me 3 days ago? You mean you've been quiet? I thought you just had a hard time at work or something like that. I didn't realize it was all because of me, right? Some of you laugh because you know that's reality. And if you're not married, it is. That's the kind of thing that happens. Don't let it fester. We're not talking about Uncle Fester either. Most people don't. We have to realize this. If you can get this into your mind, this will help you greatly. Most people don't go into a day with the intention of hurting someone. You don't go into the Lord's Day, you're not going to go into this Sunday intending on hurting somebody at church. Okay? And nobody else is. And so if you get hurt by someone, understand that wasn't their intention, probably. If it was, and you confront them, and they say, well, I meant it. Well, there's a whole different, they need to go on the top of your prayer list, and you need to take somebody else with you. because that needs to be dealt with. And that's why the Lord says that. Okay? But let's understand that. Most people don't go into a day with the intention of hurting you or someone. Help them to see that you were hurt and then resolve it right away. It's not easy. It's not easy to go to someone and tell them how you felt or what they said that it hurt you. But it's what we should do, and it's what we must do, actually. What happens if a person keeps hurting you? What do? Well, keep telling him or her their fault, his or her fault. Keep telling, hey, you did it again. Oh, I didn't mean to. You might find out a little bit about yourself, too, that maybe you are sensitive. What? Yeah. Maybe you are sensitive. If somebody does annoys you and it's over and over and over again, you might find that you are hypersensitive. And I say this because I knew somebody that was this way. And we were close. And every single week, this happened. And this person would get with me, and they would say, you hurt me. Well, I didn't intend on hurting this person, but they were always hurt. Hurt week after week after week after week. I mean, this would just happen. And finally, this person realized, you know what? I am really sensitive. And when they realized that, they took steps of growth in their life, in their relationship with the Lord, in their relationship with me, in their relationship with others. But I think that's important to understand, because read 1 Corinthians 13. You'll begin to understand a little bit more about that. What if he just keeps asking for your forgiveness? Keep giving it to him, is what Jesus said. He keeps asking the same thing. You know what? He kept asking the same thing of me, week after week after week after week. He kept asking me. Do you know what I did every single time? I forgave him. We'd sit up for an hour, 2 hours talking about this. And then in the end, he was hurt. I would apologize. He would apologize to me. And then everything, we just move on until the next week. And it happened again. But that's a real life story. That really did happen. What is the goal of forgiveness? What's the goal? I'm sorry? Reconciliation. Yep. Is it to make us feel better? Okay, good. All right, good. Yeah, Darlene says, I don't think that's the goal, but it does work, right? It's actually secondary. It's not primary. Primarily, the goal of forgiveness is not to make us feel better, because it's not about feelings. We're so used to everything being about feeling, how I feel, but that's not it. The Lord doesn't deal here so much with feeling as he deals with reality. Reality is, they hurt you. Okay, now I go to them and I tell them, you hurt me. Feelings are involved there, right? But let's get it down to pretty much black and white. I'm hurt. I go to them. I say, you hurt me. They say, I'm sorry. You say, I forgive them. That's very simplistic. But in essence, if it's dealt with right away, that's pretty much how it goes. All right? According to the Bible, the goal of forgiveness is to restore a brother or sister to fellowship. Galatians 6:1 talks about confronting you who are spiritual, restore such one in the spirit of meekness, because we could fall ourselves. Okay? They broke the fellowship with you, causing hurt, anger, and resentment. Okay? So this is what happened. So a byproduct of restored fellowship will make us feel better, right? So that's a byproduct. But it is not the primary result the Lord seeks. And let me just get into some of this here real quick. What happens if you don't forgive? Here's the reality. You are choosing to live in sin. And you are rebelling against God. Does that sound harsh? Think about it. Does that sound right? Does that sound like truth? That is truth. If you don't forgive and you don't seek to reconcile to your brother, you choose to live in sin. You say, yeah, no, living in sin are people that, they have an affair with somebody. People who live in sin, they're people who are on drugs. They're alcoholics. People who live in sin are people who don't forgive, as well as those others. But there are a lot of other sins as well. We read the story in verses 23 to 35. God takes bitterness and the unwillingness to forgive seriously. And so the question is, do you? Forgiveness is a choice. You either choose to live in bitterness and hurt, or you choose to forgive and move on with a restored brother or sister. So it's a choice. You either choose to live in bitterness and hurt, or you choose to forgive and move on with a restored brother or sister, a restored relationship. Okay, a restored marriage. If I counsel somebody in marriage, this is what it is. You try to find out what caused the resentment, because that's where it is. It's right there. Okay, resentment. Where's the root? We've got to find that root. I found it. Now, are the two parties willing to deal with the root? Maybe not while I'm there. And it may take them some time to see it. But hopefully they will. But forgiveness is a choice. Jesus chose to forgive. Remember on the cross? Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. That was a choice of Jesus. Jesus could have resented them. They spit on me. They put a crown of thorns on my head. They whipped me. They hung me on the cross. They speak. They rail against me out there. But Jesus chose to, while he's hanging on the cross, looking down at this multitude of people who've done this to him, and he says, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus didn't choose bitterness. Jesus chose forgiveness. Yes, it is that simple. Remove the feelings and deal with the reality. A counselor will always do that. They'll always get through the weeds. The weeds are the feelings, and they try to find the reality, because we've got to think that way. And that's what you have to do. You have to look back, you have to say, why am I embittered toward this person? Because the way they hurt me, right? So now I'm going to deal with it. They hurt me. All right. Now I need to go to them. And it could have been 15 years ago. And they might not even know about it, because you've kind of tried to be at least somewhat cordial. But you might have to go to them and say, you know what? 9 years ago, this happened. And it really hurt. And I've been resenting you, and I'm embittered. I've been living in bitterness. And I've realized that I've been living in sin. And it's wrong. It's sin. And God showed me this, and I'm repenting of it. And by faith, I'm turning to God and turning away from the sin. And I just wanted you to know, I'm sorry that I've felt this way toward you. And that person's probably going to look at you and say, they're going to feel ashamed. They're going to feel terrible. I guarantee it. And they're going to say, I am so sorry that this ever happened. And you know that it sounds really easy when I put it that way. It's not. That pride, the heart is desperately wicked. It's deceitful. But really, it is that simple in going to that person and talking to them about it. Remove the feelings and deal with the reality. How do I get myself to forgive? These aren't my quotes, so I put quotes. I don't feel a bit like forgiving anyone. That is at the root of most unforgiving attitudes. We've been taught that our feelings are important, that they are the motivators to action. If we do not feel like doing something, we should not do it. Okay, that's the way we've kind of been taught. I mean, that's almost the way you're raised. Your upbringing is, go tell them that you're sorry. Actually, what parents are trying to do there is they're trying to say, no matter how you feel, just do it, right? But we don't feel like it. We are to forgive our brothers or sisters an unlimited number of times, no matter how little we feel like doing it. Amazingly, feelings always follow obedience, even if they may lag a bit because our emotional makeup is sluggish. When I am reconciled to my wife, you say, wait a minute, you and Casey? Sure. It may take a little bit of time. After the I'm sorry's, I forgive you, after those are expressed, it may take a little bit of time for that feeling to catch up with everything else. You don't have to shake your head or nod or anything, but I'm going to ask a question, okay? It's rhetorical. Thanks, Mike. Have you seen that to be your experience? I'm going to shake my head to say yes. Obedience was the right thing, and my feelings caught up. And that's what will happen if we just obey and we do what the Lord wants. Okay? It's all about obedience, not feelings. That's how you get yourself to forgive. Go to obedience. Look, this is something that God is dealing with right now. So God might be dealing with that person about, their approach to people. And so he's using me to go to them and say, you know what, you said hurt. They may have no idea that the way they talk to people is hurtful. But you going to them, you might be a tool in God's hand to go to them and to make that known to that person, that they say and do hurtful things without even knowing it. But God might be using you to do that and to show them. Or God might be revealing to you that you need to love people and bear all things. Carry it on your shoulders, some of that. Understand their intention probably wasn't to hurt me today, but if it hurts so bad that it won't leave your mind, you hold that grudge against them, go to them and tell them. But understand that God doesn't want you to live in bitterness, and it's a choice of yours to forgive. And it's a choice of yours to do something about it, and it's a choice of yours to live in sin. So what's our choice going to be? Let's pray. Lord, thank you for our study here tonight. It's not an easy topic, but it's one that we must address. We see, even in the Word, in the parable that the Lord tells, that you take very seriously bitterness. For the one man was forgiven, and yet he held a grudge against another and sought to recuperate his lost wage or whatever it may have been. And Lord, he did not treat with a forgiving spirit as he should have. And how often are we the same? We, even without even knowing it, may show an unforgiving spirit to our children, our grandchildren, our spouse, because somebody may hurt us and we talk about them rather than doing something about it. Lord, will you help us to grow in this area? Will you help us to keep short accounts with you, and especially with other people as well? And do the hard thing, but do the necessary thing in dealing with hurt right away. Lord, help us to deal with bitterness appropriately and biblically. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, I'll have these studies available if you'd like one in paper form, and hopefully it'll be a help to you. All right, we're dismissed. Good night.